Well, hello. I have a quick question for you. That's probably going to take me a couple hours to answer, but I'll do it right now, in the beginning. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to sleep on a stone pillow? Go ahead, think about it. I certainly have a couple of times. Basically every single time I ever heard about these stories where people slept on rocks. You ever sleep on a rock? Voluntarily. Like on purpose, strategically, like you meant to. You ever do that? I don't think I've really spent a lot of time intentionally sleeping on stones. When I had the opportunity, I generally rolled up some kind of piece of clothing. Like when I was backpacking in the mountains with Chelsea, we'd go up to like 10, 11,000 feet in the mountains and think we're at some quiet destination in the middle of the Rocky Mountains with nobody around. And then you wake up in the morning after laying on the ground and using your clothes that you rolled up in a tiny little ball as a pillow, and your neck is sore and your side is sore because you're sleeping on the ground and you're basically miserable. And we woke up that morning thinking we were at some isolated lake way up in the mountains, and we realized we were basically on a highway of one of the busiest trails in the entire state. Turns out it was one of those very marketed trails that's like, come and see 6 waterfalls as you hike up to pristine alpine lakes. The brochures were really, really well printed. So a lot of people who came for vacation in the mountains just showed up there. And it was like a stream, an endless stream of human beings coming to this spot. And no, we did not have the pristine, quiet getaway moment that we were hoping for. Dogs came into our camp that I genuinely thought I was going to have to shoot in the throat. But my dog instead just went after him. It was great and terrible all at the same time. But we left that day not really feeling like it was the getaway we were hoping for. But there's another story about this gentleman. And by that I mean the founder of our faith. Tremendously important character known as Yaakov or Jacob or Israel. There's a couple different names that are thrown around out there these days. Or Yasharel. I hope you be patient with me as I use sometimes different pronunciations, because I'm trying to also understand things like Hebrew and the etymology of words, which is why I got these things like the Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew Language for English Readers by Ernest Klein, which is literally a red dictionary that I'm reading, and it's incredible. I'm also using, swords like this. This is the Scriptures translation, and I'm reading ones like this, which have parallel Bibles. This is Stone Edition Tanakh, because it's got the Hebrew right up next to the English. Super helpful when you're trying to see what the Hebrew letters say. But then you also learn things like, this is not actually what the Hebrew says a lot of times. And there's these translations are just a mess. So I'm trying to learn the oldest forms of Hebrew, which is why I'm learning this deck of playing cards. Just kidding. These are PALEO letters. These are flashcards that are put together by a gentleman named Eric Bissell. I always talk about his stuff. But these are like flashcards that are helping me learn the Paleo Hebrew, like the most ancient of the Hebrew languages. So that should I ever find an ancient text of scriptures, I would actually know what they are instead of just scribbles on a wall. Do you know what I mean? Because guess what happens? Lots of people, this is the Dead Sea Scroll version of the Sheen. There's like the modern flame letters with fire under it. And then there's the one that Eric Bissell renders. That's his rendering of it. There's like the Greek version. There's like, there's like the English version or the sounds that we get from it, like S or sh. And then the pictographic form that kind of goes with it, like teeth. Hence why I'm wearing a giant shark tooth, y'all. Because when I was studying this, I finally got to this letter in the sequence, the alphabet, 22 letters. When I got to this letter, guess what happened? I found this. True story. With my face in the water. Miracle. Been looking for this quite seriously since the first day when I was 8, 9 years old. Someone gave me, a child, a giant box of rocks. And you know what was in that box of rocks? Dinosaur bones and fossil shark teeth. And you know what happened to me in that moment when I first held what I didn't know then, what I do know now, was a fossilized great white shark tooth? Because modern great white shark teeth are kind of regulated, along with other kinds of giant dragon teeth like this one. But the fossil version of it, this one, is not so regulated. So people can sell and or trade or give away fossilized versions of things that are now very regulated and not allowed. But back then, I was really, really hooked. Like immediately when I realized you could open up a box of rocks from a stranger and find treasure inside in the form of teeth. I love teeth. But I was in the middle of studying sheen. Teeth. Shesh, which is also where you get linen. Shesh is sheen. Those two letters just stacked next to each other. I'm hooked on that letter because, hooked on paleo is awesome. And I want to learn the Bible out of Hebrew so that I don't have to be dependent on translation from other human beings in a chain of sequence that I myself could personally just go and verify by looking at it myself. Now, guess what happens? There's these people over time who found writings on the wall, like literal writings on the wall. Did you guys ever hear that phrase? The writings on the wall. Do you know where that comes from? The Bible. Shocker, like most truth ever as it's been written. There was literally a finger in the days of Daniel. There was a finger that wrote on a wall, like a hand detached from nothing, that wrote on the wall. And it wrote in Paleo Hebrew, very likely. Daniel was the only one who knew it, and he was able to interpret it. And because of it, there was a dude named a king, basically at the time, the son of Nebuchadnezzar's, reign and dynasty, who was using set-apart vessels. This is my copper basin. That's solid copper. It makes a beautiful sound. I'm using it as a copper basin for washing and supercharging water in because ionize your water with copper. It's amazing. It's a reason we used to have copper drinking pipes before they poisoned us all with PEX. I know it's so much easier, plumbers, but it's so much more terrible for your soul and your testosterone, which is why you should take cold showers, jump in cold creeks while wearing linen. It'll boost your testosterone and make you a man again. True story, look it up. Anyways, I digress. Guess what happened? I had a thought my whole life about stones and rocks and fixation and an absolute obsession with them because the rocks are literally the reason I'm alive. I know that sounds absurd to most human beings, but I hated my life so much. I hated it every single day I was alive. I had so much bitterness and anger, sometimes still do at times, about the way I was raised and the things I had to go through that I was furious constantly with people that were the world's definition of a monster that happened to just raise me at times. Do you know what I mean? And I was so frustrated that there was no deliverance for me, that there was no rescue for me. And the only time I ever felt tiny glimpses of that was when I found something marvelous in a rock. Other things in creation too, but generally not in human beings, because human beings to me were deceitful and they were usurpers. Like they were the continual thing that was ready to rise up and crush me in my head and ruin me. And so I had this like deep bitterness. But then all of a sudden what would happen is I would be outside and behind my parents' house. Maybe I'll actually roll in footage from this. I'll show you guys what was like behind my parents' house. But basically it was like one of my foundational, most exciting memories of my life. There was a big canal. I don't know, maybe not. Walkway that was built up behind my parents' house so that you could walk along behind behind your neighbors and stuff like this. And there was all these rocks that were filled in. Now I learned this is to control and mitigate things like water erosion on the sides of a hill and stuff like that. Back then, to me, it was just an island of treasure and wonder. And so I used to take these boulders that they had in there, like river rock. I'm sure that was imported in from some kind of country like Malaysia, and slave labor and all kinds of nightmares. But anyways, it was crazy, unique rock that I'd never seen in anywhere down there. And I would take these rocks and I would throw them on top of each other and they would smash apart and break open. And I would stare at like rose quartz and crystal and granite and these beautiful different compositions of rocks. And then I would take those and I'll bring them into my yard. And then I would set them up in little towers and build tiny little castles, you know what I mean? Fortresses. And I would erect these little things as little monuments of wonderful things that I found in rocks that gave me a tiny little outlet for my rage that I had, but it also gave me this wonderful excitation about what I was going to find in the rocks. So I'd sit here and I'd take these rocks, man, and I'd smash them together, right? And I'd look at the pieces. Oh, check it out, man. This is what I do, man. This was like my happy place. And I built all these little castles and towers, you know. Just a kid, man. This is where a lot of that started for me. Because you don't know what's in a rock until it's either rent open or until you just look very closely. Like this. This is a piece of coral. I'll try to hold it real still. This is a piece of coral. It's amazing. I love it. I found this while snorkeling. And it's got this divot here, right there. And that's my favorite thing about it in the whole world, is that my pinky fits like I was made for it, right there. It's perfectly smooth and round. I have no idea, even remotely, how that happened. But it's awesome, and I like it. But I would have never known this thing was anywhere unless I had two things to see it with. First one, lenses. I literally have to have goggles to go underwater so I can see, because I've tried holding my eyes open underwater and I just cannot see properly. I have no way of seeing the world unless I have the proper lenses with which to see it through. Second thing I needed was some kind of apparatus to allow me to breathe underwater, which I can't do normally. I've tried vehemently, numerous times. I've had some amazing dreams at times in my life where I was breathing underwater. Hands down, way better than flying, because the oceans are way bigger than the sky. Can't personally attest to that. I've not been in all of them simultaneously to compare them, but my guessing and reckoning is the oceans are way more interesting than air. Do you know what I'm saying? Birds fly, that's cool, but birds don't live in the air. Do you know what I mean? I've read about birds that fly thousands and thousands and thousands of miles. They still don't live in the air. Fish definitively live in the sea. And so do rocks, which are awesome. And so do fossils. Like this fossil sperm whale tooth that I found. Incredible, giant creature that hunts Architeuthis, the giant squid. Apparently, potentially, well into the 100-ish or hundreds of feet-ish size creatures. Crazy. They have squids called colossal squid. Outrageous creatures of the deep that none of us even know exist, because you know what's happened? We've never really seen it. Because every time we go down there, you guys, the only way we can go down there is to endure impossible pressures. So we create titanium spheres or aluminum balls like the Aluminaut. That's the Reynolds family. We have one of the deepest diving submersibles in the history of the world, publicly.
When Alvin found the H-bomb in 2,750 feet of water off Spain by following skid marks down a slope. When Alvin had to surface, Aluminaut homed in on Alvin by sonar, communicated, and watched over the bomb. The first underwater rendezvous of deep divers. Deep sea salvage, just one phase of ocean exploration. Suddenly, we have the tools to probe the depths. But what of the techniques? What of the hazards we must overcome?
Starboard ahead 1/3, come left 30 degrees.
Starboard ahead 1/3, come left 30 degrees.
Bob, drop 100 pounds a shot, lift up and go ahead on course 170, run 5 feet off the bottom.
Roger. Go ahead, George, come to right, 170. £100 out.
And it did a bunch of secret research dives for the United States military and government and metals research and stuff like this. Like they uncovered Soviet nuclear bombs or United States Navy bombs after we accidentally ran into their submarines with our nuclear submarines and sank theirs. True story, there's some crazy unclassified or recently declassified materials about submarines that ran into each other while we were trying to record each other's acoustic signatures. And we sank each other. Nuts. And so then we'd dive down and get their... We were trying to get their nuclear bombs and stuff like that, nuclear torpedoes or anything really interesting like their code books and stuff like that. So they used research vessels like the Aluminaut the Reynolds family had to go down there and collect nuclear bombs that we dropped out of airplanes on accident. Whoops. Crazy stuff.
J. Lewis Reynolds, head of the Reynolds Metals Company, had an idea. Expand human existence under the sea through free enterprise. Underwater fish farms, subsurface electric dams, intercontinental submarine transportation, mineral extraction, and even subsea vacations. To accomplish all of this, Reynolds needed a deep diving submarine, and not one existed at the time. Reynolds would take a bold step and make his new submarine out of aluminum. One-third the weight of steel, aluminum had a greater strength-to-weight ratio than any other metal of the time. As a result, Aluminaut's hull was constructed thick enough to withstand the colossal pressures of the deep sea, while simultaneously remaining light enough to float without supplemental buoyancy. With a crew of 3 or 4 scientists and engineers, Aluminaut probed new frontiers of oceanographic and marine research, and became the first submarine of any kind to dive to 15,000 feet below the ocean's surface. In 1969, using its external articulating arms, Aluminaut helped recover a top-secret thermonuclear bomb lost at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. It later rescued Navy deep-sea submersible Alvin after it sank nearly a mile underwater. A product of clever innovation and the pursuit for human advancement, Aluminaut was the forerunner of an entirely new generation of depth-probing vehicles.
But no matter what happens, when these submarines and other devices go down in the ocean, do you know what they have? Tiny little windows to see through, like literally tiny little windows to see out of, and some kind of way to breathe underwater, because, you know, we still can't do that. This limits our ability to find treasure in a tremendous way. But I have confidence and faith that if my Father in heaven would so grant me an opportunity to be down there for such a time, like this tiny little window that I have, he can bring me treasures directly into that tiny little window that I have. And right now, I'm genuinely enduring some of the tiniest little windows of time I've ever had available in my life. I have never labored so hard in my life, simultaneously researching harder than I've ever researched in my life, which has led me to sapphire pillows. Here's one of them. Okay, so here's what happened. I was reading the Bible, which I'm prone to do daily because, you know, I like to eat and live. And I get to this chapter, Genesis, right? Bereshit, in the beginning, they talk about this stuff. Elohim creates the heavens and the earth. But before that, there is a rock that's before the foundations of the earth, okay? There's a rock, one rock. There's a rock that's the center point of so many stories in the scriptures. And most of us, because we don't really need the rocks to live, don't care. Doesn't matter to us. But me, being the way I am, uniquely created and unfathomably lost in depravity at different times in my life and bitterness and rage, I zeroed in on the rocks in all these stories like I can't even describe to you. When I read about rocks in the scriptures, my Bibles get covered in notes about it because I'm always thinking about what these rocks are, like what they actually are, not what some dude in some lab somewhere thinks they might be. Like the actual rocks, what are they? I need to know this. I simply need to know, which is why I have a whole series called Nature Nate, where I implore people to become innately curious about the creation around them because it's marvelous. It's so spectacular, I can't even start to describe it. Nature's incredible, and it literally cries out about him. You ever hear about these rocks that are going to cry out? Okay, hold on. I'm going to read for a second about this rock. Okay, you ready for this? This is Genesis 29. Short synopsis. Jacob, character, Yaakov. He is born to a man named Isaac. His dad, Abraham. These are like the fathers of our faith, not the early church fathers. If you spent most of your life studying the church fathers and you started after Yeshua, you did it wrong. Go back and start with Adam. Shocker, he's the first church father. Dig into it. It's super biblical, like Bereshit biblical. Anyways, the actual founding fathers. Start from the loins of a man named Abraham. He has a son, Isaac, who rocks, literally, incredibly so. So much so that he then has two boys, Esau, Jacob, and they are literally battling it out. Crazy intense story. Pick up in the story right where Jacob usurps his brother by stealing the blessing from his father who's blind, Isaac. Super crazy story. He steals the blessing that he was going to give to the firstborn, Esau. When Esau figures this out, he basically wants to murder Jacob. So Jacob runs for his life. While on the run from Esau, who he's dreadfully afraid of at this point, he's literally has nothing with him. And as he arrives in this mountain, on a very same mountain where his father, Isaac, was going to be sacrificed by his father, Abraham, is called a place called Luz or Bethel. Later changing names. Hang on here. The name's going to change a few times in this story. It's on this mountain, Mount Moriah. That's actually what it's kind of called too. Mount Moriah, which is where Abraham led Isaac when he brought him up onto a mountain where the father said, I'm going to show you a mountain, and there you are going to sacrifice your son, your only son, the one you love. And there in that place, Isaac voluntarily laid down on the altar to be sacrificed. So Abraham builds an altar on this mountain, Mount Moriah. The same place. Now, a generation and another generation later, his grandson, named Jacob, is on the run from Esau. He ends up needing to spend the night somewhere. He ends up at Bethel, Mount Moriah. And he goes down to take a nap. And guess what he picks up for a pillow? Stone. Now, at first, most people are like, okay, this is kind of weird. It's because most of us sleep on things like this. Pillows, right? So when I say pillow, modern humans, this is what we think of. Pillow. This is a down pillow. It's full of duck feathers or goose feathers. It's soft and squishy and supple and covered in, not linen. This is not covered in linen. This one is covered in rami, which is stinging nettle, but not the same kind of stinging nettle. It's nettle, which is awesome. We actually really like it. So check out nettle. Most people think of that for pillows. But what people back then used to think of? Rocks. Yep, biblical rocks. Because you know what's super durable? A rock. You know what's also durable? Wood. So people used to make their pillows out of those things because they tended to sleep most of the time, often, on the floor. And when you're on the floor and you lay your head on the ground, bugs crawl in your ears. And people were way tougher than we were because they didn't whine about it. They just made a rock a better pillow than their hand was. Practical, right? Reasonable. Rocks are generally available on the ground and super strong, and they're going to survive your children, which that pillow probably won't survive mine because they're tough and they write and draw on everything. You know what I'm saying, parents? Don't even doubt it. Hang in there. It's going to get better, right? This is what all the other parents tell us. They're like, oh, just enjoy these young years. They're so precious and they go so fast. And I'm like, is that because you're just sleepless and delirious the whole time that you don't remember a whole lot of it? And they're like, absolutely, honey. Hang in there. It's going to be great. Anyways, Abraham, Jacob, his grandson, super exhausted. He's laying down to sleep. He pulls a rock up for a pillow, which people have been doing for thousands of years. At reference, all the images I'm going to roll in here about pillows made out of stone. Pretty impressive. Some of them are very elaborate, obviously, because they were found inside tombs where kings were dying and emperors were dying, and they were made out of jade, which is the toughest stone. There's a difference between toughness and strongness. We're going to get into strongness when I talk about marble, which is also shesh. Nope, the other. Shesh, marble. Look in the book of Esther. You'll find this. Anyways, there's an incredible thing that happens here because Jacob apparently sleeps on this stone pillow, and this is what happens. Check it out. Chapter 28. You ready for this? And Yaakov went out from Beersheba and went towards Haran, and he came upon a place and stopped over for the night, for the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed and saw a ladder set up on the earth, and its top reached to the heavens, and saw messengers of Elohim coming up and coming down on it. And see, Yahudah stood above it and said, I am Yahudah, the Elohim of Abraham your father, and the Elohim of Yitzhak. The land on which you are lying, I give it to you and your seed shall be as the dust of the earth. And you shall break forth to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south, and all the clans of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your seed. And see, I am with you, and shall guard you wherever you go, and shall bring you back to this land, for I am not going to leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. And Yaakov awoke from his sleep and said, Truly, Yahudah is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome and dreadful is this place! This is none other than the house of Elohim, and this is the gate of the heavens. And Yaakov rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put at his head and set it up as a standing column and poured oil on top of it. Matzeva is what the word is here. And he called the name of that place Bet El. However, the name of that city had been Luz previously. And Yaakov made a vow, covenant. The Tav, covenant, the mark. And he said, Seeing Elohim is with me, and has kept me in this way that I am going, and has given me bread to eat and a garment to put on, When I have returned to my father's house in peace, and Yahuwah has been my Elohim, then this stone which I have set as a standing column shall be Elohim's house. And of all that you give me, I shall certainly give you a tenth. Okay. Crazy story, right? The most exciting and wonderful stories ever, okay? I'm just going to put a little dot there, and we're going to fast forward to Genesis 35. Because from here, basically what happens is he becomes a shepherd for his uncle, who's a super deceiver, because, Jacob has to learn some serious lessons about mishpat, which is what you do unto others is basically going to be done unto you. So he stole and usurped and kind of cheated his brother out of inheritances, and so he works for a guy for 14 years who steals his wife and wages from him and livelihood and peace and sanity, and then literally gets to a place where he almost murders him. Intense, crazy story, family drama, just like, I'm sitting here whining and complaining about the misery and despair and worthlessness I had going on in my life growing up. Jacob experiences 14 years of it, which sucks. I hate that. But you know what? The Father likes to give us what we need in our life, not necessarily what we want. And he's good for us. But check this out. He gets, in that time, families. Like all the tribes of Israel that we talk about, like Benjamin and Judah, Naphtali, Asher, Dan, all these amazing people, Reuben, Levi, Simeon, they come out of this entire family crazy drama and dynamics that are going on here. This is the start of Israel. This is literally the founding fathers of our faith. After he leaves Laban, this is what happens. And Elohim said to Yaakov, chapter 35, and Elohim said to Yaakov, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make a slaughter place there to El, who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau your brother. And Yaakov said to his household, and to all who were with him, put away the foreign mighty ones, the other gods that are among you, and cleanse yourselves, and change your garments. Garments and bread. It sounds like Millenites and Linenites all over again, doesn't this, you guys? Hang in there. And let us arise, and go up to Bethel, and let me make there a slaughter place to El, who answered me in the day of my distress, and has been with me in the way which I have gone. So they gave Yaakov all the foreign mighty ones which were in their hands. That's their idols, guys. And their earrings, which were in their ears, which may be a sign of vanity. And Yaakov hid them under the terebinth tree, which was near Shechem. And they departed. And the fear of Elohim was upon the cities that were all around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Yaakov. And Yaakov came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, he and all the people who were with him. And he built there a slaughter place, and called the place El Bethel, because there Elohim appeared to him when he fled from the face of his brother. And Deborah, Ribkah's nurse, died, and she was buried below Bethel, under the terebinth tree. So the name of it was called Alan Bakuth. And Elohim appeared to Yaakov again where he came from Padan Aram, and blessed him. And Elohim said to him, your name is Yaakov. Your name is no longer called Yaakov, but Yasharel. But Yasharel is your name. So he called his name Yasharel. And Elohim said to him, I am El Shaddai. Be fruitful and increase. A nation and a company of nations shall be from you, and sovereigns come from your body. And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac I give to you, and to your seed after you I give this land. And Elohim went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him. And Yaakov set up a standing column in the place where he had spoken with him, a monument of stone. And he poured a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on it. And Yaakov called the name of the place where Elohim spoke with him, Beth-El. So tremendous, this story. This is the first house of Elohim. You ready for this? This is what's so cool about it, you guys. When you start to learn that there's like literally words in their letters of the Hebrew language. It's not like an A for us. Not even remotely the same. We're like A. It's a thing that you use to build other letters with. It means nothing else. Completely opposite of what a Hebraic concept is when it comes to letters. They mean things, like tremendous things. Like, so when you have bet, that's this letter, the B. Like we get the letter B, a lot of that sound from. But to them, B, like the bet sign, there it is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's like literally house. It's like what it means, kind of. The whole concept behind a house, a place you dwell in, like something you'll go into to hang out in. Like the separate private area in your house and then the place outside, the public face. Do you know what I mean? Like when Moses goes up onto the mountain to talk with Elohim face to face, and then he goes down to talk to the people and tells them publicly. Like these are all like the bet. And then you have the Lamed, which is how you spell anyways. I'm going to get distracted. The house of Elohim. That's literally the spot where the house of Elohim is, right? And on this spot, he takes the stone, by the way. Now it's like a super important stone, single stone, that he slept on that night. And he set it up as a standing column, okay? And he pours oil on it. Then, decades, at least 14, 18 years later, he comes back and the Father brings him back to that exact spot, and he again appears to him and speaks to him. And there he anoints that rock with oil and makes a altar for it, okay? So what I decided was it's about time to sleep on a rock. Granted, I didn't have a giant slab of jade lying around, but what I did have was 40 pounds of sapphires lying around. These aren't necessarily the pretty sapphire style, like this one. This is one of my favorite ones that I've ever gotten. This is the natural raw shape of how the sapphire grows out of the rock. It grows out of this more blackish, this one grows out of this black schist material, a different kind of rock that it grows in. But this is the raw shape. It literally grows in this hexagram. It's tremendous. These ones that I made my pillow out of look like this. Rocks, right? Those are all sapphires, all of them. It's just an entire bag of sapphires. So I ship myself sapphires by the pounds when I travel around different states. I put them in a USPS flat rate shipping box, and then I ship them anywhere in the country for the same price as if I filled the box with feathers. I can fill it with sapphires. So what I did was I sifted through the sapphires, pulled out obviously my favorite ones, and then I put those in treasure chest bags because Chelsea and I have this whole entire thing called the LinenRailroad, which is another endeavor part of our ministry where we try to ship people garments because we've been living in garments of death, and the Father wants to give us garments of praise, which is like this. This is a garment of praise that he gave me, made out of linen. I love it. So when we send people linen or wool or silk garments, sometimes I put in there treasure chest bags full of treasures, like treasures from the sea, treasures from the earth. I believe everybody needs sapphires in their life because he gave us these two stones of witness that are called the stones of testimony, kind of called like the 10 Commandments, they're often called. They're written on sapphire tablets. It doesn't say that in most of your Bibles, but in Exodus 24:10, it straight up says that. The ground beneath the feet of Yahudah on the mountain literally turned to sapphire. And then from that ground, they took tablets right out of it. We have sapphire tablets. Epic. Anyways, I wanted to make a pillowcase. I have this one. It says Hoy. No, I'm just kidding. It says Joy. And it's made of linen. And I filled it with sapphires. Like 13 pounds of sapphires. And then you know what I did? I slept on it. And I dreamed. Straight up. I prayed that the Father would reveal to me whatever he wanted to. And then I had a dream. Pause. I'm not going to get into some crazy dream stuff yet. I just had a dream of a dude standing in a pool of water, saying, "The pool of Siloam, the pool of Siloam." That was it. It wasn't anything super crazy. And I thought I knew what the pool of Siloam was because for the entire summer, I've been reading John chapter 9. Check this out. Back when I was shepherding goats constantly, I was reading John chapter 9 almost every single morning. What my takeaway at the time was, man, I think I really got to rub dirt on my eyes and go swim in a creek or a spring. So that's what I've been doing. I've been swimming in a spring or a creek or a river or an ocean or some kind of body of cold water every single day for about 5.5, 6 months now. And you know what happened? It's straight up healing me, like tremendously. Like my body is in the least amount of consistent pain that it's ever been. Granted, some days I'm stinking furious with pain. It sucks so bad. But when I jump into the water, it's amazing how much better and more invigorated and stronger I feel. Remember cold water therapy, y'all? I talked about it briefly. I have an entire massive in-depth research study that I've been doing involving cold water therapy. And I just haven't gotten around to putting it out there yet because, I don't know, sometimes we're on the Millenite or the LinenRailroad train and I don't have some catchy phrase for getting in cold water to make you guys get after it. But you need to get in cold water. It'll literally heal you. Hang in there. John chapter 9. You ready for this? And passing by, stop. Go back a little further. Check this out. I just saw this. Stones right above it. John chapter 8. Check this out. Yeshua said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham came to be, I am. Therefore they picked up stones to throw at him. But Yeshua was hidden and went out of the set-apart place. This is the temple, by the way, where people have built a temple to try to worship Elohim. I have a strong suspicion that it's not the same spot as the rock that Jacob slept on that night. And here's why. We're going to get there. Going through the midst of them and passed by, and passing by near the temple, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples, or taught ones, asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he should be born blind? And Yeshua answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of Elohim might be made manifest in him. It is necessary for me to work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one is able to work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And having said this, he spat on the ground and made clay with his saliva and applied the clay to the eyes of the blind man. And he said to him, go, wash in the pool of Shiloah, or Shiloh, which means sent. So he went and washed and came out seeing. Pause. He went and washed in the pool of Shiloah and came out seeing. You ready for this? Cold water cures are biblical. Do you know how many times human beings in the scriptures get cured and healed by getting in water? Lots. Go look it up yourself. There's another character who gets healed by another prophet at a different time by washing in the Jordan River 7 times, and he comes out healed. There's a lot of y'all who need to go wash in cold water at least 7 times, maybe every day for the rest of your life, and you'll be healed. Maybe just one time. I don't know. But I bet if you pray and earnestly seek the Father, he'll give it to you. So all summer long, I was reading John chapter 9, and I was like, man, I think I'm supposed to swim in cold water. Or I think I'm supposed to swim in spring water. Because when you look up the pool of Siloam, guess what? You find out that it's a real place. Shocker, because the Bible's a history book, y'all. If you didn't know that, it's because you haven't read it, nor have you probably ever been to Israel, or Egypt, or Sinai, or Saudi Arabia, or any of the places that we hear about in Scripture, like Babel or Babylon. They're real places where these things actually happen, so much so that the stones are still crying out in testimony. I'm not joking. The stones are literally still bearing witness to all these events that took place over there. So I got stuck on this because when I woke up that morning, I was like, oh, I'll look up the Pool of Siloam. I know it's a place that they found. I believe it was 2004. They found this pool, which is the Pool of Siloam that Yeshua literally sent this guy to. And this was the one they believe was constructed around the Second Temple period. This pool is a big, giant pool that is fed by a spring, which comes from the Gihon spring. The word Gihon literally means like springing forth. It literally means like spring. It's like a place where water gushes out of. It's the Gihon spring. This spring feeds this pool, which is where this character now, thousands of years ago, went into, washed, and came out seeing. And then it leads to a super long narrative that I'm not going to go into right now. But what happens is one guy goes into a pool of spring water and he comes out healed. Now, question, did the spring water heal him? Did obedience heal him? Or did Yeshua heal him? Or was it all of the above? If so, I hope you wrestle with that. And that's as far as I thought the Pool of Siloam was going to take me. But then something most interesting happened because I was like, oh, cool. I'll share this with people. I think maybe I'll talk about cold water therapy now and share my testimony on it. No. I started looking into archaeological pictures from antiquity about the first time anybody ever had a thought about where the Pool of Siloam was. And you know what it led me to? This crazy thing called Paleo Hebrew. Once again, right here. And I remembered, because this is a book we got. Eric Bissell is the one I most prefer when it comes to Paleo Hebrew studies. But this is one of the gentlemen who helped Eric Bissell come to understand a lot of these things. His name is Dr. Frank T. Seekins, and he has this book called Hebrew Word Pictures. Chelsea, super visual kind of learner, and which is why Paleo Hebrew is awesome. And if you look at things like, okay, here's this one on sheen. This is more like a workbook, which is super helpful. Okay, this is the sheen. A tooth. Remember we talked about that, right? Sheen. A tooth. The 21st letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Super cool. So you get to see also the etymology. There's ivory, like in Ezekiel 27. I love ivory. That's ivory from a dragon. Longer story. But then he has this incredible etymology of the development of it. From its like first inscription, like that Paleo Hebrew we talked about, and then over to the time of Moses. Sorry, I'm going to have to look at it. Early Hebrew and Phoenicius, King David. And then he has this really interesting thing here, which says, let's see, the Pool of Siloam inscription. And that's what it looks like in the Pool of Siloam inscription. And then I saw, wait a minute, Pool of Siloam inscription. I found the inscription for the Pool of Siloam. I'll roll that in here. So guess what happened? Children were going in the spring, playing in the water because, you know, children, that's how you enter the kingdom, is you be like a child. So get in spring water. Chelsea and I have this super constant need to understand when it is, at what age in our life, we stop going in the water. Because we try to tell people now, we're like, get in the water, it's amazing, it'll be so good for you. She did a whole video on vanity and how you murder vanity, you'll go in the water. Because most people stop going in the water the day they start thinking about their bodies more than they think about what would happen if they just got in the water and played. You know what I mean? Like when a 6-year-old sees, wow, beautiful clear spring water, they get in it. Or they're like, Dad, please, can I go in it? Can I go in it? Please, 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 please. And you're like, fine, go. And the dad stands there and he's like, wow, they look super happy. Good for you. I'm so tired. You know what'll happen if you go in the water? You'll wake up, son. You'll get some doggone consternation, some toughness in your soul, and you'll be swimming like a champion and more alert and attentive and stronger than you've ever been in your life. No, I'm super serious. But we always wonder, what's the age where you stop going in the water? So we have all these like running guesses, and then we started asking everybody we could find, hey, was there a time in your life where you stopped going in the water? And you know what we almost always find? Is it's because some kind of root of vanity is buried in your soul. Like, oh yeah, the day I became insecure about my body, or what my face looked like when my mascara ran down it because my beauty mask peeled off my face and revealed who I actually was to everybody around me, and it was uncomfortable. Or I wasn't really proud of who I really looked like with, you know, immodest clothing on. Shocker. We started wearing linen while going in the water, and we felt like it was a double dipping of supercharging wonder. And that's an even better story. But I digress. We wondered why children seem to be the ones who get in the water the most. It tends to be because they're not so whiny about being uncomfortable. And they've murdered vanity because it hasn't entered into their life yet, unless their parents have ruined them and indoctrinated them with vanity and beauty masks early. Or they let them watch Disney and ruin their soul. You can repent at any time and stop poisoning your children by letting them look at black mirrors of nightmares. Hold on. The Pool of Siloam. Check this out. Back in Israel, there is this spring, the Gihon Spring. It used to flow out of Mount Moriah, same mountain we were talking about, guys. Out of Mount Moriah, it used to flow downhill because mountains generally have springs towards the bottom section. A mountain, when it has a forest on it, the forest and the trees in particular help to gather and collect and hold moisture and put it down into the soil. And they can also release that moisture back into the atmosphere through evaporation. When they are like hot, when they're sweaty, basically, when they're hot, their leaves, you'll see leaves on trees and plants, they wilt in the heat of the day. And when they do that, it draws more water up so that it can be released to cool them down. If you ever feel a leaf in the heat of the day, a leaf is never hot to the touch. But if you rip a leaf off the tree, it will, and throw it on the ground, in a couple 30 seconds sometimes, or a couple minutes, it will be warm and hot and wilt, right? That's an amazing miracle that just cries out of a testimony unto itself. But water is flowing continually. If you strip a mountain of its trees, the springs that are fed by all that moisture being collected and balanced that flow out of the bottom, those springs tend to dry up. And right now, Mount Moriah, pretty barren, y'all. Check it out. there's a temple and all this other crazy stuff going on over there at this time. But the Gihon Spring used to flow out into the Kidron Valley. Well, this is a problem if you want to, build a wall and have a little fortress and stuff like that, and you want to be able to survive like a siege or an attack from an army. And so one of the kings of Israel built a wall around the city. Well, that spring would have basically been not really flowing in the right direction. So he dug a tunnel. This is 2 Chronicles 32. And after these matters and this trustworthiness, Sennacherib, the sovereign of Assyria, came. I have a video, pause real quick. I have a video titled The Slaughter, which goes into a way deeper story when it comes to this story. And it's well worth your time, so do check it out. And Sennacherib, the sovereign of Assyria, came, and he entered Yahudah and encamped against the cities of defense and said to break them open to himself. And Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come, and his face was set to fight against Jerusalem. And he took counsel with his rulers and mighty men, Gibbarim, to stop the water from the springs which were outside the city, and they helped him. And many people were gathered, and they stopped all the springs and the stream that ran through the land, saying, Why should the sovereigns of Assyria come and find much water? And he strengthened himself and built up all that wall that was broken and raised it up to the towers, and outside of it another wall, and strengthened Milo, the city of David, and made large numbers of weapons and shields. And he appointed battle officers over the people, and gathered them to him in the open space at the city gate, and spoke to their hearts, saying, Be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, nor be cast down before the sovereign of Ashur, nor before all the army that is with him. For with us there are more than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is Yahudah, our Elohim, to help us and to fight our battles. And the people leaned on the words of Hezekiah, the sovereign of Yahudah. Oh, this is so good. Okay, Hezekiah. It says they stop up the springs, which is totally not going to give you the picture of what actually happened. What happens is they dig a tunnel. Through solid bedrock that goes like 1,700 feet into the city of David, so that when they need the water now flows into the city, and they can access the water from inside the fortress. So that way the king of Assyria, when he surrounds a city to besiege it, to attack it, they normally would cut off all the water and all the food so that the city would starve, or the city would be in horrific drought and lack of water, and they surrender, capitulate, and they let the enemy in. This is how siege warfare is accomplished. So Hezekiah digs from one end to the other in solid bedrock, and they meet in the middle. Incredible story. And you know how we know this is true? Because they found an inscription in Paleo Hebrew, basically from a contractor. It sounds like it's written by a contractor, like almost on the edge of graffiti style on the side of the wall. And it basically says, they had pickaxes and we had pickaxes, and we were digging our way towards each other. And when we got to the middle, we could hear each other's voices. And then soon we broke through. That's kind of the modern translation that we get from it, which I have a feeling is super watered down and probably not accurate to what the thing's actually telling us happened at that moment. But do you know what happened? This Paleo inscription, called the Pool of Siloam inscription, which is where a lot of ancient Hebrew linguists have identified and learned how to decipher ancient Hebrew texts, came from this inscription. Do you know who found that inscription? Not adults, not archaeologists, kids playing in the water, because kids play in water and they find treasures. So go be a child, enter the kingdom, and you'll find treasures like the literal words of Yahudah written on stone. Incredible. So inside King Hezekiah's tunnel, right at one little point in there, they found this inscription on the wall in Paleo Hebrew. What happened was there was an archaeologist who then, picked it off the wall. And then guess what happened? It ended up in somebody else's hands who sold it to somebody else for a ton of money. And now it's no longer in Israel, and it's in, I believe, Turkey in their museum, which it would be amazing to see. But guess what? That water that was flowing through there came from the Gihon spring. So then I saw this Pool of Siloam inscription and was like, oh my gosh, Paleo Hebrew, are you kidding me? The Pool of Siloam has Paleo Hebrew. And I was geeking out, and I thought I'd found the treasure chest, right? And I'm screaming and jumping and yoked out. And this was like day 2 of research. And I'm like, sweet Moses of the Nile, I have found treasure, and I can't wait to tell the world. And then guess what happened? I started putting together the Pool of Siloam inscriptions for this video. And you know what I discovered? Jacob's stone. Yeah. Like the stone. I found the stone. I didn't find it. I found somebody else who found it, who had found it from somebody else who'd found it. Guess what happens?
To show you my tour of the ancient city of David. The city of David was built originally on Mount Moriah, and this is the entire mountain of Mount Moriah, encompassing the Temple Mount at the top of the mountain. The mountain runs between 2 valleys on the eastern side, the Kidron Valley, and a valley on the western side, which cannot be seen in this picture, but in this inset over here, you can see the ancient Pilgrim's Road that was built around 30 BCE, 30 before the Common Era, by Herod, and this is where ancient pilgrims would go to the Shiloach pool at the bottom, make their way all the way up the top to the Temple Mount, where they would offer their sacrifices. You can see how the deep valley is actually exposed below this original road, and therefore the city was very strategically located because it had no exposed flank on the western side and no exposed flank on the eastern side. The only exposure was on the northern side, and therefore the city could easily be defended. But I'm going to take you back to the most ancient part of the city, about 4,000 years ago, 2000 BCE. Several vessels were discovered up the top of this mountain section here in grave sites built into the bedrock, where ancient people were buried. Most of the top of this mountain section, on the bedrock of course, was used at that point in time for burial purposes, for sacred burial purposes. And about 100 odd years ago, these vessels were discovered by Parker. They're in the Rockefeller Museum in Jerusalem, and they can be seen there today. So really, about 4,000 years ago, no occupants on this mountain, a few burial sites at the top sections of the mountain, and a few cave homes and very ancient homes located elsewhere on the mountain itself. But we'll take you through those step by step. Now, if you look at the cut through here on the side of this mountain, on the yellow, follow the yellow line, this is the eastern flank of the mountain. The eastern flank runs down to a spring here, which is known as the Gihon Spring. This is the water source for people who were living on the mountain. The water would have run through the valley floor and off to the east to the Dead Sea, which is the lowest point on Earth, and which is about 8 kilometers away. That's how the water would normally flow from the Gihon Spring. Today the water flows into the Jerusalem water system, and but this yellow line, on this yellow line, was built a very large fortress system here, which can be seen over the Gihon Spring. So the timing of that construction was about 3,500 years ago, 1400 BCE roughly, and we can see from the remnants of that construction that it was really designed roughly over the water area.
So when you go to the back, where like the Gihon Spring is called the fountains or the headwaters, the foundations of the spring, when you go back to the Gihon Spring, people for thousands of years used this spring, and they would build like a wooden platform over it so that they could fill up big buckets of water, stone pots or wood pots or carrying vessels, bags of water, and they would fill it up, load it on this wood platform, and then they would carry it up. Water carriers or water bearers would carry it up into the city of David, because it's a big climb, like hundreds of feet to get up into the city. So they would pay people to do this. Generally, the kings would pay people to do this, okay? Or like in the time of Joshua, and when they took the lands, they had an entire group of people. Go read Joshua 10. Awesome. There's an entire group of people that this was their full-time job. Woodcutters and water carriers for the people forever. This is a spot in Israel that you can still see to this day. You can go and walk in this tunnel. You can go and stand in this water. You could drink of the Gihon spring to this day. And if you go through that tunnel, you know what's going to happen? You're going to walk directly past Jacob's Stone, and you're not going to know it, because there's no giant place that's advertising this is Jacob's Stone. Because what happened was, archaeologists were called in by the Israeli antiquities authorities to basically determine why a house on the side of Mount Moriah had all of this foundation cracking taking place. So guess what happened? They dug the top of it off. And as they dug down, they found a temple. Not a huge one, a small one, 4 rooms. And in these first 4 rooms were these crazy, bizarre inscriptions on the ground. And they looked to me like Paleo Hebrew letters. Letters I don't just understand yet. And they're so confusing, even to the archaeologists who found them, that they posted basically a Twitter page asking, hey, does anybody know what these mean? Because we sure don't. We are dumbfounded. And I would be too, because I don't know what they mean. But they certainly have this appeal to Paleo Hebrew. And so I would like to put these out there to all of you out there, to put your own noodles to it and pray and eagerly seek the Father. I recommend on Shabbat because, commandments, they're super important. And when I really want to know stuff or learn stuff, I find out on Shabbat. It tends to be my super download day. And it should be for you too. Sit down on Shabbat. It's literally the sign. The mark of the covenant. It's the sign between Yahudah and his people. The Shabbat. The people that guard his Shabbat. Exodus 31. Anyways. We want to figure out what these are about. Other people want to figure out what these are about. But they found an olive press and a grain press. And then they found an altar spot that was on bedrock where they put an altar. But the most incredible thing in the second room that they found was Jacob's stone. There's a standing stone. Matzeva. A standing stone is erected like a guy used for a pillow, with like 12 stones stood around it, like an altar, like what we just read about in Genesis 35. And guess what? He had an olive press there for pressing small, select, special oil. They pressed and they poured on top of the stone. On top of the stone. The stone is still there, you guys. The stone of Jacob is still there. And it's right there next to the Gihon spring, which is literally next to Hezekiah's tunnel, with the Paleo inscription right there. All this stuff is interconnected, and it leads to the Pool of Siloam. I saw this, and I'll roll in the archaeologist and the assistant archaeologists and folks who put out a video on this, and it has like 50 views. It's shocking, unbelievably shocking. At the same time, it's not, because the Father conceals his stones of testimony until a perfect time where it's brought forth and then revealed as a witness to the world.
Passable, and at the top here, you can see in this circle is the Temple Zero complex that was discovered by Eli Shukron in 2009. Here is that complex, and it's 4 rooms. In those 4 rooms, there are some very, very important artifacts. One artifact in particular that we're going to focus on here today. Here is an altar platform, which we can see in this location. That altar platform is well known according to the Bible, according to Jewish practices, that every single altar is built on bedrock, on earth, or bedrock specifically, and then it's so that it's connected in order to purify, to remain pure. Anything that's in bedrock is always going to be in its pure state. So up in this section was built a copper or some kind of an altar section that's rested on that platform, and on that altar, sacrifices were offered. Now those sacrifices were slaughtered, processed over here. The fats from the diaphragm moved onto the altar, offered on the altar. This is a liquids channel for wine, for blood that would have run from the sacrifice. This here is most likely a vessel stand, so that blood from the sacrifice would have been stood in a vessel. The vessel was a tipped vessel, so that it would have tipped over if it didn't have somewhere to rest in the base of the bedrock. And this here is a flour press. This here is an oil press. So really fully equipped for sacrificial offerings. But the particular focus here is this object, which is known as a matzeva. You can see here it is in its plexiglass box, protected. But the matzeva that exists is the only artifact that has been preserved on this in this complex for the past at least several thousand years, going back 3,500 years or more. So this matzeva, which stands in this room by itself, Jews were prohibited from making a covenant with God by anointing a stone matzeva. It is not a gravestone. It is a stone that commemorates a covenant with God, and that stopped at the end of the forefathers, Jacob, Isaac, and Abraham. There were no more offerings, no more covenants made with a standing stone. So if indeed this construction, which we know is 3,500 years old, based on findings at the base of the quarry here, if we know it goes back that far, then this temple structure, according to Eli Shukran, and certainly his view is that it predates this structure, and I share that view. Now, the question is really, why would they have built this entire complex here? Was it really to protect the water? Certainly the early parts of the complex were not to protect the water, so then why would you have built it in the first instance? And here's a view that I hold, that this structure was actually built not just to protect the water, but also to obfuscate the mountain, to block the mountain, to stop people coming to Temple Zero.
This led me into the last 2 weeks of mind-blowing research into other stones of testimony that have been brought out of the land that I never heard about, but I kind of heard about when I was, 10, 11, when I went to one Christian school that talked about apologetics at a time in my life. Apologetics is like defending your faith, right? And they were talking about Mount Sinai and the real discovery, like Jabal al-Luz in Saudi Arabia, a mountain that was lit on fire, where their golden calf is, you can literally see the golden calf that they set up and carved into images to, and said, this is the Elohim who brought us up out of Egypt. Like, let's bow down and worship him. You can see the rock that was split open and water gushed forth out of. You can see this all to this day, you guys. The stones are all still there. The testimonies are still there. The spot where they crossed the Red Sea, you can still see it to this day. The fire that came down out of heaven between Pharaoh's armies and Israel, it melted the sand to glass, and it's still there to this day. The Red Sea, where they crossed over, Pharaoh's chariots sunk in the waters, where Moses and the people went across on dry land, and then Pharaoh and his armies chased them, and the sea swallowed them and drowned them in it. The chariots are still there. Okay? Mind-blowing, crazy stones of testimony.
And so in the foreground, right in front of us here, is a melted beach where the sand and the stones were literally melted together like concrete.
Really?
This is not loose sand. This is a melted beach which the pillar of fire created when it stood here. So
separating the Egyptian army from
Yeah.
the fleeing Israelites.
Yeah. So again, this is more evidence, that confirms the location
My
here.
goodness. Now, how did you find out about that?
I heard about it, and then I saw it myself. So here it is. You see, this rock is just infused in with the sand and the little rocks there, and this is all hardened. This is like concrete.
That
And
is amazing.
Jason here is stepping on it. It's very solid. This is a different area.
How did the locals explain this?
I asked the hotel owner was here with us that we know, and he says, I've never seen this before. He said his hotel's in a different area, but he was amazed at what he saw. So
Well, there's the evidence right there. It's solid.
Right. And so a piece of it was broken off for us to look at, and you can see up close here all the little rocks and the sand. They're melted together, infused by the pillar of fire. And this goes on for some ways. This isn't just one little spot. And so Ron Wyatt went scuba diving out there, and various things have been found in the water. You can see human femur bone that is coral encrusted, which would be something you would expect. And on the left here, we see a normal one. On the right, you see the coral encrusted femur from one of the soldiers. On the top left, you see a human rib cage stuck in the coral.
Now, what about people who say, "Oh, this is table coral"? It's just
It's not, because it has metal in it. And so here's a horse's hoof. It's shriveled up when they took it out of the water. It's shriveled up. So again, we have horse parts, human parts.
What are we seeing here? What is this coral?
And so this is coral standing on an axle, and it has a raised center hub with spokes going outwards. Here's another round chariot with a raised center hub and then spokes going out, and it's got a round shape to it. Again, it's covered in coral.
Do some people say that these are just modern shipwrecks?
Some people have said that, but again, this agrees totally with the design of the chariot wheels. With a raised center hub and using metal detectors, there is metal in the center. There are spokes going out. This is a 4-spoke wheel with 3 spokes left. 4-spoke wheels, 6-spoke wheels, and 8-spoke wheels are found here. Of course, using the metal detector, like he's demonstrating here, all the hubs here contain metal, and that is the design of the Egyptian chariot wheel with the metal center hub. Now here is a gold-plated wheel. There were 600 choice chariots used in the Exodus, we're told, so you would expect to find 1,200 chariot wheels here with gold. And this one is special. It's gold-plated, and 2 or 3 of these were found by Mr. Wyatt. Now we see a more shallow area where the Red Sea crossing took place. It's shallower here compared to the north and compared to the south. It's still deep. It has to be a deep area. It's 2,800 feet deep, but that gives you a 4% grade, which is manageable. Over in Saudi Arabia, you see the remains of the pillar that was found there on the Saudi Arabian side. It was cut down by the Saudi authorities. It had Hebrew writing on it.
Stones of testimony, Ark of the Covenant, maddening, incredible discoveries that are going on. Golgotha, the hill, the garden tomb, the cross holders, the Ark of the Covenant. It led me down crazy, epic, marvelous archaeology and discoveries that have happened for centuries and rediscoveries that have happened over the last 40 or 50 years. And I was lost in it, you guys. I have been so lost in it, and I suddenly had this overwhelming, intense burden. Like, I can't even start to describe to you guys, where I was genuinely trembling and afraid to talk about this. Like, seriously afraid. Because I realized if this is sincerely the stone that Yaakov set up and slept on that night, this is literally the stone where the head of our fathers rested. And he saw Yahudah standing. He saw him, you guys. This is where Jacob became Israel. Like, do you understand? This is the birthplace of Israel. This is the house of Elohim. This is the stone where the house of Elohim was supposed to be built. But then I get stuck because here's why. There's also this other stone they talk about that the builders reject that was supposed to be the cornerstone. And you know what's really, really crazy? Solomon, when he goes to build the temple, he tears down this tabernacle that David built. David built a tabernacle for the Ark of the Covenant to rest in. Question, where did David put the tabernacle for the Ark of the Covenant to rest upon? Where was that? The exact spot. Perhaps was it in the same temple, this temple that was built by his father's father, by Jacob. It says Jacob built a tabernacle there, a temple there. Jacob built a place, a slaughtering place for this standing stone, a matzevah. After this, you guys, there's not matzevahs anymore. The people don't do this after this. This is like a very special single occurrence that takes place here that is so memorable that people for thousands of years would have known this was the house of Elohim. This goes back to Abraham and Isaac. This goes back to Melchizedek, who was the king and the prince and the priest of Jerusalem. This spot, like this single spot, is one of the most important places in the entire earth, and it is disregarded and it is abandoned and it is forgotten until in 2009, a crack in the foundations, the rocks rent open and revealed a treasure that was hidden beneath the feet of everybody else who'd been there for thousands of years, who never knew once that right beneath their feet was the stone that the builders rejected. It's become the chief cornerstone. That one is still crying out to this day. And my contention is that the Father is revealing, He's giving us eyes to see and ears to hear the wonders that are in His Word, and we can see them with our faces today because He is opening up the treasure chest of His earth. He is bringing forth the stones of testimony for people to see as a witness against the stones of deception, the laws of deception that are being raised up. Because you know what's so insane? People literally still worship the rocks like they are their gods. I'm not kidding. We pay with our tax dollars every single day to fund a religious system that teaches children, those same nice, wonderful, amazing children that would jump in the spring water, that they came from rocks. True story, giant, incredible religious indoctrination taking place every single day where we say the earth was created billions and billions of years ago. 4.6 billion years ago, roughly, after, the swirling dust ball of nothingness that came out of nothingness appeared and then heated up and then slowly started cooling down, and then water began to rain on the rocks, and that water turned into some primordial soup, and out of that came the first single-celled organisms, and out of that came, fish out of the sea, and then came creatures on the land, and then came us. Amazing, right? We worship rocks. If you're an evolutionist, when it comes to these kind of generalized terms about evolution, you have a religious system that believes you came from rocks. Your gods are still gods of stone. Gods of stone. But you know what? Those stones are not supposed to be the thing we bow down and worship and say, you made me. Save me. Save me. You know what? The stones are a witness. They're a sign. These rocks are literally a sign of the covenant that Yahudah would remember his people, and that he would once again raise up the tabernacle of David that was torn down. This is Acts 15. Hang in there. Everybody has these theories that talk about in the end times. Thank you, Hal Lindsey, by the way, for most of our eschatological views and perceptions about what's going to happen at the end of days, which are fallacious, meaning they're lies, meaning somebody misconstrued the word and then they used it to sell an inordinate amount of books and then made that kind of doctrine and theology impressed upon our minds so that we think this is the way things are going to go down. One of the main talking points that is always discussed is this great third temple that's supposed to be rebuilt someday, and that this Antichrist figure is going to go into that and sign a peace deal with Israel for 3.5 years in that temple, and all this. You've probably heard some of this stuff before. Problem is, the third temple, misnomer, you guys. Wrong concept. Missing the forest for the trees, y'all. You know who's going to come back? And when Yeshua comes back, do you know what he's going to bring with him? Check this out. Acts 15. And Simon has declared how Elohim, Acts 15 verse 14. Simeon has declared how Elohim first visited the nations to take out of them a people for his name. And the words of the prophets agree with this, as it's been written in the book of Amos, chapter 9, verse 11 through 12. After this, I shall return and rebuild the booth of David, which has fallen down, and I shall rebuild its ruins, and I shall set it up, so that the remnant of mankind shall seek Yahudah, even all the nations on whom my name has been called, says Yahudah, who is doing this, who has made this known from of old. Yeshua is going to return and rebuild the tabernacle of David, which was torn down. Do you know who tore it down? Solomon, his son. The builders, when they could have built the temple, rejected a cornerstone. And I believe, perhaps, my conjecture, let's say, is this is the cornerstone that was rejected, just like Yeshua was rejected. And people built something that was awe-inspiring, right? Not that Yahudah didn't go there, not that Yahudah didn't dwell there, not that it wasn't a magnificent, spectacular place. I'm not trying to denigrate nor speak a word against the marvelous, set-apart place that the Father allowed to be built up by Solomon. However, there were builders who were brought in who were outsiders. They were not the children of Yasharel. They were brought in and built a temple after a pattern and in a way that others have utilized for evil doings. Do you know what I mean? There's some other kings of Israel who rose up and used it for great evil and set up other gods and other Elohims like Antiochus Epiphanes. Hence my entire series called The Mighty Maccabees, where I'm dealing with one of those characters who rose up and set up a statue of Zeus or Jupiter so that on Christmas, December 25th, his birthday, everybody had to go, worship him like we still all do to this day. Yahuwah's people were supposed to be set apart. Yahuwah's dwelling was also a tabernacle of skins. It was a tent. It was a place of meeting. It was an appointed time, appointed place for his people to gather together and fellowship again. And Yeshua is going to set it up, the tabernacle of David. He's going to bring out his Ark of the Covenant, his mercy seat. He's going to sit upon it and judge the nations again. And you know what? People are not going to talk about the temple. You know who they're going to talk about? The Son of Righteousness who's sitting on the mercy seat. That is going to be what comes out of our mouth. Wonder and awe and marvel and weeping and grief at the one whom we've pierced. The one who we pierced with our lying lips, our deceitful hearts, and our feet that were quick to shed innocent blood. We will fall on our faces and we will marvel and we will say, may Yahuwah be magnified, because great is the deliverance that he has authorized. And surely this is the stone the builders have rejected. It is Mashiach. He is the stone that watered them in the wilderness, and he is the rock that followed them. He is a mighty, mighty Redeemer and one who is quick to save his people. This entire endeavor has launched me down a road of discovery and rediscovery that has truly captivated my mind in a way I can't even start to articulate. And simultaneously, while this was going on, I began to work and labor harder than I ever have in my life, because the work is plentiful and the laborers are few. Do you know what I'm saying? So I pray constantly that the Father would increase and bring more laborers for the time of the harvest that is near. I have never in my life had an opportunity to build until literally the last month of my life. I have tried to find a way to go and build with people that do construction, right? Like actually go learn how to build, because I have like a list of skills that I would like to learn so that when the Father should entrust to me land of my own someday, I would be able to be well equipped to go forth and manage it and build upon it a life, not just for myself, but for others to be able to enjoy and reap the wonders of His creation upon. But in order to do that, I knew there were skills that I needed to know in order to be able to do that well. And one of the main ones on there was building. But I had no idea how to build. And I would try to go and get connected with people or try to stay at somebody's property who was a builder, who did construction, like modern construction, right? Almost always is what I was looking for, people that did modern construction and engineering. And you know what? Every time I tried to do that, the Father shut me down time and time and time and time and time and time again. And you know what happened? Like I had to labor for years by the sweat of my face before I got entrusted an opportunity to start building. And I started learning to build greenhouses with round stuff we find lying around, cast away and disregarded materials and resources like wood, don't have it right here, like wood and bamboo and other structures that were thrown in the trash, old T-posts and bent pieces of PVC and whatever the excess of society had supplied us. And I got to learn how to build in the most odd and misshapen and unique way, because the way that I have been building is not with squared and cut manufactured lumber and timber like most of our society has been built, but with rough stuff that's brutal and not easy to work with and requires ingenuity and creativity. And it began to change me and transform me over the past few weeks. Simultaneous to this is where I'm looking at these things like the cornerstone and the rock over and over and over again. And I'm seeing that there's these people out there who have this innate need to know, who have gone forth to Israel and who've scoured the earth looking for these stones of testimony. And it inspired me and it blew me away, because I realized the Father is giving His lenses back to His people. He's giving people what they need in order to see the tiny little window of the earth so we can look upon it and glorify Him. And we can recognize the wonders of what He has built and is building and will build again. I long for the day that I can go look upon these stones with my own eyes. And until then, I am dependent upon other people who the Father has equipped to go over there and bring a good report and show it to us and bring forth these treasures from the places they've been hidden. I am delighted to find these treasures, and I hope each and every one of you would consider sleeping on a rock and jumping in a spring and studying the languages that He has given to us, so that we can pick up His book and know what it says for ourselves and no longer be dependent on transcriptions and scribes and the words of other people. That what if one day the Father brought out His stones of testimony, like the 10 Commandments, the sapphire tablets, written on it by His own finger, and we could look and read with our own eyes what those words say, and we wouldn't have to be dependent on these other systems to tell us what they say, to interpret it in a way so that it fits the doctrinal belief systems of their denomination. But instead, we could rest assured that our Father had preserved His word. So many times in my life, I remember being taught that this word is infallible, right? All my life, I was told the word of Elohim, the word of God, is trusted, it's infallible, it's without error. But you know what? The English versions that we have are not. They are not. There's errors all over them, you guys. You know why? Because you can pick up an NIV Bible and it says in there that Yeshua, when He's talking to His disciples, said, "Thus by saying this, He made all foods clean," which is a lie. That's not in the text. It may be in your Bible, but it's not in the text, meaning it wasn't written and it was not spoken by Yeshua ever. But you know what's amazing is I grew up most of my life thinking, thus by saying this, Yeshua, Jesus, made all foods clean. Therefore, we can eat whatever we want, which is totally disobedience to what Yahudah clearly says all over the Bible, constantly, from Genesis to Revelation, even in Acts 15 when people think that's not what He's talking about. Two of the descriptions that the apostles agreed upon in that time were dietary restrictions to the Gentiles. They said, yeah, dietary laws should still definitely be observed by these Gentiles when they're coming in, because dietary laws don't just go away because, thus by saying this, Yeshua made up these words and said this stuff. No, Yeshua says, I only said the words my Father said. Meaning, Yeshua never said anything that the Father said was no longer a sin anymore. Never in this did he take back what he said in this. Do you know why? Because his word cannot be broken. So if you're looking at a text and you're reading in a translation something that contradicts something else that's written in the scriptures, it's probably because you're reading from a translation that is not accurate to the original text. The original Hebrew, like the book of Matthew was written in, is not in error. The translations we have been given are a false dichotomy. They contain the scribal errors at times. But you know what's beautiful is Yahudah has preserved his word in stone. And I'm confident that those stones of testimony will be lifted up again. Joshua, when he was commanded to go into the promised land, was to write the Torah, the commandments of Yahudah, the instructions. He was to write it on stone. That, I believe, is still somewhere to this day, and it'll be brought forth again. I hope myself, my children, my family, and every one of you who's watching this will be able to read that for yourself and not be dependent on others to trust what it says when the Father does bring that out. Because the stones genuinely are crying out, just like our children are crying out, begging us to come into the water, begging us to come and give up our vanity and come and live vibrantly with them. You can do it, you guys. The Father can give you an eye to see and an ear to hear. He can give you wisdom and knowledge and understanding. Daniel, when he was given, gosh, just check this out, y'all. If I'm a little all over the place, it's because I've got like an ocean of information I'm eager to share with you guys, and I'm trying to catch up on it. So hang in there. I appreciate your patience. Check this out. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, the sovereign of Yahudah, Nebuchadnezzar, the sovereign of Babel, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And Yahudah gave Jehoiakim, the sovereign of Yahudah, into his hand, with some of the utensils of the house of Elohim, which he brought to the land of Shinar, to the house of his mighty one. By the way, one of the things Nebuchadnezzar does not steal is the Ark of the Covenant, nor the tabernacle of David, because guess what? Jeremiah hid it in a cave. Read 2 Maccabees chapter 2 if you want to know more about that. I digress. And the sovereign said to Ashpenaz, the chief of the eunuchs, to bring some of the children, just pause real quick. These people know what they're talking about when they say things like children. Like they actually mean children here. Most of us just brainwash, plug in, man, now. But it's children, so pay attention. The children of Yasharel, and some of the sovereign's descendants, and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good looking, and having insight in all wisdom, having knowledge and understanding, learning, capable to stand in the sovereign's place, and to teach them the writing and speech of the Chassidim, because they knew Hebrew. Check this out. And the sovereign appointed for them a daily ration of the sovereign's food and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end thereof they should stand before the sovereign. Now among them were the sons of Yahudah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names, and he called them Daniel, for he called Daniel Belteshazzar, and Hananiah Shadrach, and Mishael Meshach, and Azariah Abednego. Daniel laid it upon his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the sovereign's food, nor with the wine which he drank. So he asked permission from the chief of the eunuchs not to defile himself. Do you see this? This is Daniel preserving the ways of his father, meaning he was not compromising for the systems of Babylon. This is like literally Babylon, you guys, the Babylon. And here's someone who's not compromising by allowing unclean things to come into the temple of his body. Shocking. The Father blesses this like crazy. Check this out. And Elohim granted Daniel loving commitment and compassion from the chief of the eunuchs. So guess what? Yahudah in order to bless Daniel for his desire to be set apart, holy, kadosh, in his body and the guardianship of his body, he blesses him with favor from the Babylonian chief of the eunuchs. That's amazing. This could be the chief bad guy in the world. Like a lot of people look at the agents of evil in the world, they're characters in a story, you guys. They're not real like you think they're real, the bad guys. You know what I mean? Whatever character who is being repped as the worst bad guy, they're not the bad guy. You got to understand this. We are. Each and every one of us, when we disregard our Father's instructions, we're the nightmare in the room. We're the ones who, what we fear, you guys, is what we get. What we are afraid of is what we get. So if we go into the wilderness and then when we get there, we're like, I can't go into the land full of giants because there's giants there and you just brought us out here to kill us and our children. The Father's like, oh, okay. So after I delivered you from the biggest army on the face of the earth and I killed them all in front of your face, you're going to say that I dragged you out here and vainly accuse me of bringing you here to cause you harm on your children? Fine. You're going to die. You're going to get what you believed and what you feared is going to happen to you. But your children, them are going to be children of the wilderness. And I'm going to raise them up and they will have boldness and confidence to go in courage and might to conquer that land. And I will give it to them. And you know what? If you guys hold the same fear, if you fear these agents of evil and the system that they're bringing upon us, if you fear that, you're going to get it. But if you fear and revere Yahudah, your creator in heaven, and the mighty king, the conqueror of the Yahudah Sevaoth, the master of the armies of the heavenly hosts. He's the commander of the legions of the heavens. Did you not remember Yeshua saying, I could call legions down and rescue myself if I wanted to? Legion. That's the commander of the heavenly host. He is Yahudah Sevaoth. He is the Lord of hosts, often is how it's translated. He is the master of the armies of the heavens. You guys are afraid of a dude who breathes, who thinks he came from a rock, who worships a rock. Check your fears. Daniel feared Yahudah and refused to allow something to come into his body that would compromise his covenants with his creator. And you know what? The Father gave him the favor of the agent of evil in the story. Amazing. Check this out. But the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my master, the sovereign, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Meaning they're all children, like 11, 13, 14 years old. Then you would make my head guilty before the sovereign. And Daniel said to the overseer, who the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please, test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearances be examined before you. By the way, this is water to drink, not Gatorade, not Coke Zero. If you guys are drinking that stuff, throw it in the trash where it belongs because it's poisoning your temple. I'm not kidding. You guys are killing yourselves. The Father loves you. He gave you a pristine, marvelous, incredible walking miracle of a body that can detoxify itself, heal itself, restore itself in such an incredible way, but you have to stop putting poison in your body. I'm serious. If you wash your wife in the water of the word, you will receive a wonderful inheritance from the Father. If you wash her in the water of the word. Go watch my wife and I's story on vanity and the laver and the copper basin that the wives, the ministering women in the wilderness, melted down their copper mirrors of vanity that they brought with them from Egypt. They melted down their vain mirrors and they made a copper fountain for the Levites to wash themselves in. And it was an incredibly intricate part of the tabernacle. It's tremendous what happens when we murder vanity and we give that up. When we do that with our wives, we wash them with the water of the word and they become transformed. This is exactly what can happen to your body if you would give yourself water, living water to drink. It would heal you. But if you don't, you are poisoning yourself constantly, time and time and time and time again. And if you don't drink water, like actually drink water, I prefer raw spring water. That's my old style. I really like raw spring water when it's available, right? Other times you can get other kinds of water, like reverse osmosis or distilled water, right? There's different ways you can filter water so that it's better. But your tap water is literally poison, especially in the United States. Some of you are in other countries where they actually do care about their citizens a little bit more, and they don't murder them slowly by poisoning them with hydrofluorosilicic acid and pharmaceuticals and chlorine and bleach and crazy insane amounts of pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and poop. Because you ever think about it? You poop in water that some guy down the river then drinks. How much poop do you think you've drinking in your life? Common sense says, I've been pooping in a bucket for 2 years. And it makes me think about things like when I poop in a toilet that has water in it, like, wow, that's strange. Why should I poop in a bowl of water that then gets flushed down the toilet, that then goes downriver to a water treatment facility where it gets cleaned up with chemicals and then put back into the same river that the next city uses for their drinking supply? Think about it, you guys. We're drinking poop. We're drinking pee. We're drinking menstrual rags. We're drinking the filth of our society, aborted human baby parts. This is what we are doing. We've been cursed, you guys, because we feared these people, because we feared Babylon more than we feared Yahudah. And if we would return to him, eat vegetables and drink water, straight up, try that. Challenge you for 40 days. Do the Daniel fast. It's biblical. Guess what happens? Let's find out. Then let our appearances be examined before you, and the appearances of the young men who eat the portion of the sovereign's food, and do with your servants as you see fit. And he listened to them in this matter, and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their appearances looked better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the sovereign's food. And it came to be that the overseer took away their portion of food and the wine, then they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. And as for these 4 young men, Elohim, the earthly man gives them water and vegetables. And you know what happens? That's the greatest blessings for their physical bodies. But you know what's so great? Because they did this, Elohim gives them special gifts. Check this out. And Elohim gave them knowledge and skill in all. Check this out. All learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. And at the end of the days, when the sovereign had said that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the sovereign spoke with them, and none of them all were found, and none among them were found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And so they stood before the sovereign. Teenagers, you guys. Young teens. Children. These are children who they won't trust to rent an insured car. Do you know what I mean? Like, you go on to rent a car, you got to be 25 years old in the United States to rent a car. These are teenagers who are smarter than everybody else in the kingdom now. You know why? Because they guarded their bodies and they obeyed the commandments of their father. And in any word of wisdom and understanding about which the sovereign examined them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians, the astrologers, who were in all his kingdom. And Daniel continued until the first year of the sovereign of Koresh. These guys, children, these 4 children are 10 times wiser than all of the magicians, the astrologers, the wise men of Babylon. 4 children, wiser than all of them. Do you know why? Because their father raised them up with these words. Daniel. Literally, these inscriptions, you guys, check this out. You know when they change into like the more modern Hebrew that we have today? Do you know when they went from like the PALEO version that we see here and like on the Pool of Siloam inscription? You know when they changed Daniel? Daniel was told by the angel of Yahudah to hide the words and seal up the book until the end times. He literally changed the languages so that we couldn't understand them anymore. Which is why when Nebuchadnezzar's son and all of them are partying with the set-apart vessels and the handwriting happens on the wall, when that happens, nobody knows what that language says. Not even Daniel's, like other Israelites around him. There's literally coyotes howling at the moon now. I hope you can hear that. There's... Sorry, super exciting. These are the letters that changed, and all these letters in our language that we see today, like the more modern letters that we have, they went from like the Pool of Siloam inscription you see? Daniel. Okay? I believe Daniel most definitively sealed up the words because he had knowledge and wisdom and all understanding, so that they were hidden until such a time that they may be brought forth. Modern letter, what are we on? Psalmic. This is like the engineered structure, like a trellis for wine when you want to grow grapes. When you want to grow grapes on the vine, being a vine dresser and all, this is like trellises, right? An engineered structure that supports stuff. And then you get to Daniel, post-Daniel. Look at this. Total change, right? Anyways, Daniel was entrusted with one of the most important jobs in the history of mankind, which was to hide the true words of the Father's language. And he did that until such a time that it was brought forth. And now you know what's amazing is the Father's doing it again. And you know how my wife and I are combating vanity? Let me just show you this. We're covering our mirrors with his letters. So you know what happens? Instead of seeing my face on the mirror when I look at it, or looking at my body in the mirror when I look at it, you know what I see now? His letters. So that I want these, when my children, I put them down low, like way down low. Check it out. I put them down low so that when Jubilee or Naomi or any other children that ever come into my house, when they walk into my house, do you know what they see? The letters of my Father in heaven. They see his words. They see his verses. They see his scriptures on their faces. It's right there. So instead of seeing a mirror of vanity, which is a false image, mirrors always show you the inverse of reality. Vanity will always show you an inverse filter. But the Father, he will give you clear lenses so that you can see through this tiny little infinitesimally small window an aspect of his creation that is so massive you could spend the rest of your life studying it. True story. I could sincerely spend the rest of my life looking for treasures in the sea through tiny little windows and be never, ever capable of starting to ascertain the splendor of my Father in heaven and his miraculous ability to create intricate, unique, marvelous things that no eye can see but his. Because when I'm looking in the ocean, when I'm looking in a river, and I'm looking through these tiny little lenses, I desperately pray for him to bring it to me, and then he will. And that's incredible. But you know what he does also? Is he holds the vastness of the oceans in his hands. The breath of his nostrils, he dries up the sea. He makes the sea dry. Like, I wonder what the Israelites saw in the Red Sea when they looked next to themselves. What did they find in the dry ground when they walked on it? I want to know that stuff. I want to go there and see it with my own eyes. I want the deep underwater submersibles so I can go down there and see for myself and bring up the stones of testimony that are still down there crying out to this day. And I believe that if the Father would will it for me, he will give that to me so that I can go and do that. So I can bring the treasures of the earth out of their hiding places and give them to the world, because that's what my name is. Nun Tav Nun, Nathan. Natan. It means to give. He gives. He gives. That's what I'm here to do. He gives me these treasures so I can give them away to his people. But the greatest treasure in all my life that he has given me is his letters, is his language, is his words that were written by the fabric, by the very finger of Elohim on sapphire tablets. The 10 Commandments. You need that in your life. I need that in my life. And I want those to be written on your heart, and I want them to be written on my heart, so that when I do them, I will get wisdom and knowledge in all understanding and in all skill. That's what we need to impress upon our children, so that our children would be 10 times greater in wisdom, knowledge, and understanding than all of the mighty agents of evil in the earth combined. You know how I know that to be true? Because the Father uses the few to shame the strong, the weak to shame the strong every single day. And at any given time, you guys, he can raise up a judge from amidst us and deliver his people. So don't be afraid. Be confident that he will do everything he has set forth to accomplish. Because you know what? His word never returns empty. It is going to be so memorable, and I'm so excited that you are born and alive, and that you have an opportunity to find restoration and deliverance and strength and courage to overcome no matter what you are facing. Because the days may be evil, you guys, but you were born for such a time as this. So I pray you live dangerously and you be courageous to study and to give yourself away for the kingdom's sake and for the treasure that you have found. Sell everything you have. Sell everything you have, you guys, and join the kingdom. Be a part of his kingdom. Find his treasures and share it with the world. Give them the bread of life. Give them the garments of praise. Because you know what Jacob asked for from his Father in heaven? He said, if you would give me raiment, clothing, and you would give me bread to eat, and you bring me back to this mountain, I will raise up a house for you out of this stone. So I pray the Father will once again raise up a house for his people out of that stone, and that we would raise up the name of Yeshua, that we would rejoice and delight in the words of our Father Yahuwah. I pray you would be strengthened and encouraged this day. I love you. I'll talk to you soon.